Hello, I'm Richard Gisbert, and you're at The Listening Post. This week, Russia and the murder of one journalist that still haunts the media there. Reporting on China, new rules in the run-up to the Beijing Olympics and what they mean. Katie Couric, journalist, single mother, under fire for going to Iraq.
Why is she doing it?
Well, it's a clear act of desperation.
And Second Life, the home movie, our viral video of the week. Welcome back. At The Listening Post this week, we're devoting most of our broadcast to two monoliths, superpowers, past and future, Russia and China, and the state of the news media in both countries. First up, Russia, and the latest twist in the case of the late Anna Politkovskaya, the critic of President Putin and the Chechen War, who was murdered last year. 10 arrests were recently made in the case, including some intelligence agents. 2 of the suspects have since been released, but the case has put the Russian media under scrutiny over whether they are willing or able to get to the bottom of the story. That's our starting point this week, the Russian media and what their coverage of this case says about them and the country they're reporting on. The recent rally in memory of Anna Politkovskaya took place on what would have been her 49th birthday. It wasn't just journalists who attended. Garry Kasparov, chess champion turned human rights campaigner, was there, mourning a murdered journalist and grieving for the Russian news media under President Vladimir Putin.
If we look at the number of voices in the media expressing independent or anti-government opinion before 2000, when Putin came to power, it was like a valley about to come into bloom. Today, it is a burnt desert with only a few shoots.
Anna Politkovskaya stuck out in the Russian media landscape. There was her book, Putin's Russia, Life in a Failing Democracy. She traveled frequently to Chechnya to report on an ugly war that the Kremlin didn't like Russians reading about. At the time of her murder, she was preparing a piece that would accuse Russian forces in Chechnya of torture.
There is no doubt that Politkovskaya's murder is on the conscience of Putin's regime. It has been fighting the independent press with all its might, and her articles stood in the way of many people.
It took almost 11 months for the Russian authorities to make arrests in the Politkovskaya case. And when they did, the prosecutor general said agents of the FSB, the intelligence service that succeeded the old KGB, were among the suspects.
The statement that there were rogue elements of Russian security services involved into the murder of Anna Politkovskaya didn't come as a surprise to the Russian media as such. The investigative journalists have already repeatedly shown those connections of some elements of the security system of the country with various unlawful gangs and groups.
However, the authorities also pointed the finger at Russian oligarchs living abroad and at Chechen criminals in Russia. In short, just about everybody but the Kremlin.
I think that President Putin is trying to tie up all loose ends before leaving office. It's as if he wants to say, look, I solved all the most notorious and difficult criminal cases. Everything worked well under my regime.
Ms. Politkovskaya's former editor at Novaya Gazeta remains dubious about the arrests. He was quoted as saying, "So far, we have had no guarantee that the names of the real masterminds behind the crime and the names of those who, in the end, will feature in the indictment will be the same." The pro-Kremlin daily Izvestia had a different take. A commentator there said, the Kremlin realized that unless this murder was finally and convincingly resolved, the whole world would be convinced that it was the authorities who removed the inconvenient journalist. While a government newspaper, Rossiyskaya Gazeta, effectively declared the case closed with a headline that read, "Politkovskaya murder solved." Such conclusive, definitive reporting comes as no surprise to Ms. Politkovskaya's former colleagues, who are among the few critical voices left in Russia.
Она в двух других аспектах. Первый заключается в том, что почти не осталось.
There are two main issues with freedom of reporting in Russia. Firstly, almost every media organization is now owned by an oligarch or a financial industrial group, which is loyal to the Kremlin. The second problem is the journalists themselves, who prefer to earn big bucks writing nonsense.
Будь то корпоративное внутри издания, будь то самого журналиста.
The third issue is the danger. According to the US-based Committee to Protect Journalists, Ms. Politkovskaya was the 13th reporter murdered in a contract-style killing since President Putin took office in 2000.
There have been several tragic landmarks in regard to the killing of political journalists in Russia. One of the most high-profile cases, obviously, was the one of Paul Khlebnikov's, the editor-in-chief of the Russian version of the Forbes magazine. Allegedly, this case, which is still ongoing, as far as we know, is connected to the case of Anna Politkovskaya. So there is a whole mystery of unsolved cases, which we just have to wait and see what the results, what the outcome of the investigation of Anna Politkovskaya be. It can shed some light on the others.
And the murder investigations seldom amount to anything. According to Reporters Without Borders, only one of those cases, the murder of Ms. Politkovskaya's colleague at Novaya Gazeta, Igor Domnikov, has produced a conviction. As long as cases like the death of Anna Politkovskaya remain unsolved, the media work in fear.
Our journalists are under tremendous pressure while this murder remains unsolved. If it is solved, we want to be certain that they have caught the right person and that those who ordered the killing are also found out.
The case of Anna Politkovskaya has been heavily politicized. It was in focus for various political speculations from both in Russia and abroad. In Russia, there is a huge public demand for the solution of this case. It obviously marred the image of the country and the image of the government.
How would Anna Politkovskaya have covered this story? Probably, says Garry Kasparov, by looking at the bigger picture.
Politkovskaya никогда не считала себя героиней, она писала правду.
She carried out her duty as a journalist. The fact that people like her become heroes in Putin's Russia says less about them and more about the atmosphere in which they lived and worked.
Атмосфере, в которой они жили и работали.
Our Global Village voices now with their views on the murder investigation and the state of news reporting in Russia.
I think these arrests and the way that the government has dealt with the arrests give a very mixed message to the Russian public and to the media. What's important about it is that we've seen a very large number of murders of journalists over the last 7 years in Russia, some of them dying in very suspicious circumstances, some of them quite clearly assassinations. And this is one of the first cases in which quite publicly a proper investigation is taking place.
As a Russian journalist, when I speak to foreign reporters, they all think I come out of some information prison where I'm not allowed to say anything. That is not true. That is not true. I can write articles in the Russian media, quite critical pieces, publish them in newspapers and especially online.
If you don't like what you're seeing or reading in global media, let us know. Email us at listeningpost@aljazeera.net and we'll teach you how to stop screaming at your television and how to start talking through your webcam. Time now for some Listening Post news bites. A word of warning, as if they needed one, for internet users in China. The authorities there are using pop-ups to remind anyone using Beijing-based servers that they're being watched. The pop-ups are called Xing and Cha, and they appear whenever someone tries to access a banned site. Web users in the city of Shenzhen have been seeing them since last year, but now they're branching out to the capital. The characters look innocent enough, but don't be misled. Click on them and you'll be whisked off to their own personal web spaces where you can alert the authorities to anyone surfing no-go areas on the web. Kind of like Orwell, only interactive. FM radio station owners in India are trying to fight a ban on news and current affairs on their stations. FM radio was introduced in India in 2000. There are already more than 100 stations on the air and another 150 expected by the end of 2007. but the regulations state that news should not be part of any FM station. Some stations have been illegally including news snippets and current affairs in their broadcasts, which are mostly music, and the authorities don't like it. The FM stations argue that in certain cases, such as the Mumbai bomb blasts of 2006, their newscasts helped keep communities informed. Google's bloggers site might not be delivering what it promises. Apparently, it's been targeted by hackers who have planted fake links in legitimate blogs, which, if you click on them, can lead to booby-trapped downloads that target PCs which run on Windows. It's hard to tell how the links got there, but the software expert who first spotted this problem says it has something to do with an email mechanism within the blogger site. The booby traps do not appear to have any effect on Macs. We've reported on Katie Couric before. She's the first woman solo anchor of a U.S. network evening news program. This past week, she went to Iraq for CBS News and was criticized for it. In discussions on Fox News, Couric, who's a widowed single mother, was accused of being irresponsible for going to Baghdad and putting her job before her children.
Why is she doing it? Well, it's a clear act of desperation, and here she is going off to Iraq, paying absolutely no attention to the fact that her children have already lost one parent.
Couric's broadcast has lost viewers over the last year, and her trip was seen as a rather dangerous ratings ploy, which CBS denies. Couric said that during her visit, she was only able to report on what the U.S. military wanted her to see, which makes you wonder why she bothered. Coming up after the break, opening up or clamping down, the complex relationship between the Chinese government and the news media.